Let's go over Flynn's best team comps. All his teams will consist of an off-field electro support to generate electro particles for Flynns, an off-field hydro unit because you need lunar-charged, and a final support. For the electro support, Inefa is the best option and is by far Flynn's most important teammate. For the final support slot, Sucrose is the best buffer. For the hydro slot, you have a couple options. The baseline hydro recommendation on nod-krai release is Ino. While her base kit only really applies hydro off-field, Ino's cooldowns enable short rotations, her C1 buffs EM, and her C6 buffs lunar-charged damage. Another option you can use is Yelan. While she's one of the current better options, her cooldowns unfortunately force the team's rotation time to be a bit longer, and her damage percent buff is irrelevant because normal damage percent doesn't buff lunar charge damage. Farina runs into the same problem, making her burst relatively useless. On paper, at KQM standard level of investment, the Farina team is one of Flynn's highest sheet DPS teams as long as you skip her burst and use your skill every other rotation to maintain a shorter rotation time. However, this team will permanently be at 50%, so you will have to be comfortable with overall less survivability if you want to play this team. Because the hydro support options aren't amazing for Flynns and don't have perfect synergy, even units like Candace and Seedreen, who are generally considered as not very good hydro supports, aren't that far behind the other hydro options since they also enable shorter rotations. If you don't want to play Sucrose, you can use Kazuha instead of Sucrose, but because Kazuha gives damage percent after swirling and damage percent doesn't buff lunar charge damage, he is worse than Sucrose in this team. Similarly, although Shilonin provides res shred, 4-piece scrolls damage percent buff also isn't very helpful, but you can use a set like 4-piece instructors instead. You can use other anima supports like Venti, who can restore electro energy if his burst absorbs electro, and Lynette, who has an attack buff in her kit. Using a second electro support is also an option, such as Auroron and Eonsan. Lastly, you can use Llama as the final support slot with Yelan in the hydro slot for a quick bloom team. The endgame content in the first nod-krai patch incentivizes playing Flynns and Llama on separate teams, but if you do want to play them together, the team still works fine. Now, if you don't have a Nefa, your best choice is to use Ino, who needs to be used as the hydro option in nod-krai's initial patch to make sure that the team has 2 nod-krai characters, Sucrose, and an all-field electro alternative for Inefa. 3 choices include Fischl, Eonsan, and Sara. Fischl looks to be the overall best option on paper, Eonsan is okay assuming you have high constellations, and Sara is usable, but her buff uptime is not ideal for Flynns. 2 other choices include Auroron and Kuki. Unfortunately, Auroron can't buff the team well with using 4-piece scroll, but he does have a nice attack buff with C6, and Kuki is a decent option if you need the healing. You can use someone like Lan Yan for defensive utility, but replacing Sucrose decreases the team's damage even further. So Inefa is very important, but Inefa-less teams will likely be sufficient enough to clear content, especially since the endgame in version Luna 1 will heavily favor Flynns and lunar-charged. Lastly, if you are fighting a hydro-infused enemy such as the Hydro Tulpa, then Chevreuse Overload will be Flynns' best team in this scenario. Of course, if you aren't fighting a hydro-infused enemy, this team doesn't work.